Tonight, we journey to a land of quiet rivers and sun-drenched fields, where the rhythm of life moves with the breath of the seasons. There, in a small village nestled by the water's edge, lived a man named Raju. His days were spent guiding oxen, strong beasts with broad shoulders, pulling heavy carts along the rutted paths between villages and distant markets. Raju walked beside them, his hand resting lightly on the wooden yoke, feeling the steady pull, the familiar sway. He led them forward, always forward, yet in his own heart, Raju felt as if he was following, not leading. He felt a deep, quiet yearning for direction, a sense that his own life had no true path, only the well-worn ruts of endless days. Raju was a man in his late 30s, sturdy and weathered, his skin tanned by years under the sun. His strong hands, accustomed to the rough rope and the smooth wood of the whip handle, moved with a practiced ease. His dark hair, often dusted with the fine, warm grit of the road, framed a face that was kind, but his eyes, though gentle, held a restless, seeking quality. He moved with a steady, deliberate gait, much like his oxen, his steps measured and unhurried. Yet, within that steady rhythm, a quiet disquiet stirred. He guided his team with an almost unconscious competence, their hooves kicking up small clouds of dust that settled on the dry grass by the roadside. The lowing of the oxen, the creak of the cartwheels, the distant calls of unseen birds. These were the familiar sounds of his life, a constant, comforting hum. But the comfort did not reach the deeper places within him. Every morning, before the sun had fully lifted above the distant, mist-shrouded mountains, Raju would rise. He would feed his oxen, strong, patient animals with eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. He would harness them, feeling the weight of the yoke settle onto their broad shoulders, a weight he felt mirrored in his own spirit. And then he would set out. The paths were familiar, worn smooth by generations of carts, winding through fields of ripening grain, past quiet homesteads, and alongside the slow-moving river, whose surface reflected the changing sky. He knew every turn, every dip, every rise. He knew where the stones were loose and where the earth was soft. He knew the way, and his oxen knew the way, but knowing the way for them did not mean knowing the way for himself. He would often pause, allowing the oxen to graze on a patch of sweet grass by the riverbank. He would sit, his back against the warm, worn wood of his cart, and watch the river flow, its surface an endless, changing tapestry of light and shadow. The water always moved, always found its way, effortless and true. Raju wished his own life felt so. He watched the wind rustle through the tall grasses, each blade swaying in unison, yet each retaining its own individual dance. He watched the clouds drift across the vast blue, forming and unforming, never holding on to a single shape. Everything around him seemed to possess a natural direction, an inherent purpose, a quiet unfolding. But Raju felt stuck. He felt like a cartwheel, turning and turning, covering ground, but without a clear destination of its own choosing. The feeling of being directionless, of merely following the inertia of his days, had begun to weigh heavily on him. It wasn't a sudden sadness, but a slow, persistent ache, like the constant pressure of a poorly fitted shoe. He longed for a path that was his own, not just the path laid out for his oxen. He longed to feel that he was truly guiding his own life, not just being pulled along by habit and circumstance. He yearned for a sense of purpose, a quiet conviction that his steps were leading him somewhere meaningful, somewhere beyond the next village, the next market, the next endless rut. And so, Raju began to try to find his own direction. he started by changing his routes. Instead of the familiar track to the southern market, he would take a longer, less traveled road that wound through a small, forgotten forest. The air there was cooler, thick with the scent of damp earth and unseen blossoms. The sounds were different too, the deeper rustle of ancient leaves, the chirping of unfamiliar birds. For a while, the novelty brought a flicker of hope. He would tell himself, "This is it. This is a new path. This is my choice." But as the days turned into weeks, the new route too became familiar. The dust was different perhaps, the trees taller, but the quiet feeling of going nowhere, of merely moving through another landscape, settled back upon him like the evening mist. The inner compass remained still, stubbornly refusing to point him toward his own true north. He tried training new oxen. His old team, reliable and steadfast, knew the roads almost as well as he did. Perhaps, he mused, if I have new animals that do not know the way, I will be forced to truly lead. So he acquired 2 young steers, full of nervous energy and unguided strength. The first few days were a struggle, a tangle of ropes and uncertain steps. Raju had to be constantly vigilant, his hands firm on the reins, his voice steady. He had to show them the path rather than letting them find it. He felt a surge of engagement, a sense of purpose in the teaching. But as the young oxen learned, as they settled into the rhythm and began to anticipate the turns, Raju found himself falling back into his old ways. He would still walk beside them, his hand on the yoke, but the quiet leadership he had briefly felt began to wane, replaced by the familiar feeling of being carried along. The new guides, too, became old guides, and his own internal journey remained undefined. In his quiet desperation, Raju even tried walking backward. It was a peculiar sight, him facing the cart, his oxen plodding forward, while he, with his strong, weathered hands still on the yoke, reversed his steps. He thought, perhaps, by literally turning away from the path, by seeing where he had been rather than where he was going, he might somehow glimpse a new direction. It was an awkward, slow, and often frustrating endeavor. He stumbled over unseen roots, misjudged the width of the path, and felt a constant strain in his neck as he tried to glance over his shoulder. The oxen, patient as ever, continued their slow, steady progress, seemingly undisturbed by their driver's strange new method. But walking backward only made him feel more disoriented, more lost. It was not a new path, but merely the old path viewed from a different, less comfortable angle. The journey felt no more his own, only more arduous. The sun would set, painting the sky in deep hues of orange and violet, casting long, peaceful shadows across the fields. Raju would return to his small home, unharness his oxen, and prepare his simple meal. The quiet hum of the village settling for the night would surround him. The scent of wood smoke mingled with the sweet aroma of cooking fires. Yet, even in the stillness of the evening, the feeling persisted. He had moved, he had worked, he had journeyed, but in his own heart, he still felt adrift. He had traveled many miles, but he had not moved an inch closer to finding his own true path. The weight of the literal yoke on his oxen was temporary, lifted at the end of each day, but the figurative yoke of his own directionless life seemed to remain, a constant, subtle pressure. Perhaps, dear listener, you too have felt this quiet yearning. Perhaps you too have known the feeling of moving forward, day after day, through familiar landscapes, yet sensing a deeper part of yourself longs for a direction that feels truly your own. It is a common human experience, this seeking, this quiet questioning of the path beneath our feet. Like Raju, We often try to find new ways, new guides, new perspectives, hoping they will illuminate a clearer path for us. We strive, we experiment, we push, yet sometimes the very effort to find direction seems to obscure it further. Raju, at the beginning of his struggle, felt this weight keenly. He watched the moonlight spill across the fields, painting the well-worn paths in silver. He knew these paths intimately, every curve and contour. He knew where they led, from one village to the next, from one market to another, but he longed to know where he was going, where his own heart was truly headed. The oxen slept soundly, their breathing deep and even. The village slept, but Raju, in the quiet of his small home, remained awake for a time, feeling the familiar, quiet ache of a journey that had not yet truly begun. He carried the weight of the yoke, both literal and figurative, a heavy reminder of his constant movement and his persistent stillness within. And so, the days continued, each one a slow, steady turn of the cartwheel, carrying Raju forward, always forward, along paths that were not yet truly his own. The quiet ache persisted, a subtle hum beneath the surface of his days. Raju continued his rounds, the familiar paths stretching out before him, each turn, each rise, each dip etched into the landscape of his memory. He still watched the sunrise paint the sky, still felt the warmth of the sun on his skin, still heard the distant calls of birds, but the beauty of the world, though present, felt somehow separate from him, a painting he observed, rather than a landscape he truly navigated. He yearned for the day when his own inner compass would finally stir, when the path beneath his feet would feel like an extension of his own unfolding purpose. And then, one morning, the path shifted. Not the physical path, but the way Raju perceived it, the way he walked upon it. His lead ox, the sturdy, dependable beast with the placid eyes that had guided his team for countless seasons, began to falter. It was not a sudden stumble, not a dramatic collapse, but a subtle hesitation, a slight veering to the left when the path clearly turned right. Raju, accustomed to the animal's unerring sense of direction, initially dismissed it as a momentary lapse, perhaps a stone beneath its hoof, or a distraction from a buzzing fly. He nudged the ox gently, and it corrected its course. But the next day, the hesitation was more pronounced. The ox's head would tilt, its broad shoulders would sway uncertainly. Its normally clear, dark eyes seemed clouded, unfocused. Raju, with a growing unease, led the team to the village elder, a woman known for her quiet wisdom and her deep understanding of animals. She examined the ox with gentle hands, her eyes, though aged, keen and knowing. She ran her fingers along its muzzle, spoke soft words into its ear, and then slowly, she shook her head. "The light has gone from his eyes, Raju," she said, her voice a soft murmur. "He is blind." The word settled upon Raju like a sudden, unexpected snowfall. Blind. His led ox, the very animal that had been his most reliable guide, the one he had implicitly trusted to lead the way, could no longer see. A wave of confusion, then a quiet panic began to rise within him. How could he continue his work? How could he guide his team along the rutted, winding paths, through the dappled light of the forest, across the open, sun-drenched fields, without his lead ox to show the way? He had always depended on its steady pace, its innate sense of direction, its silent knowledge of every stone and every turn. He had, in truth, merely followed. He had rested his hand on the yoke, yes, and he had held the reins, but the true navigation had always been entrusted to the animal. He had been a driver, yes, but more truly, a follower, moving along a path chosen by another. The elder, sensing his turmoil, placed a gentle hand on his arm. "He still has his strength, Raju," she said. "And you have your eyes. Perhaps this is not an ending, but a beginning of seeing." She offered no more words, just a quiet, knowing look, and then returned to her spinning wheel. The gentle hum of the fibers filling the silence. Raju returned to his team, his mind a quiet swirl of worry and a strange, nascent curiosity. The immediate challenge was immense. He could not simply replace his lead ox. The bond was too deep, the training too long. He had to find a way. He had to guide, truly guide. The next morning, as the first pale light of dawn touched the eastern sky, Raju began his work differently. He still yoked his team, but this time he walked not beside the blind ox, but slightly ahead of it, his strong hand no longer merely resting on the yoke, but firmly, deliberately, on the animal's neck. His eyes, usually cast forward with a passive gaze, now became sharp, attentive, seeing. He scanned the path ahead, not just for the next few paces, but for the subtle changes in the earth, the slight rise of a root, the gentle curve of the track. He felt the texture of the ground with his own feet, noting the firmness of the soil, the looseness of the pebbles, the dampness of a shaded patch. His voice, too, changed. Where before he might have offered a general, rhythmic hup to encourage the team, now he used precise, gentle commands. "Left, my friend. A small step. Good. Now straight, steady. Mind the dip." He spoke with a quiet clarity, his words a constant, reassuring presence for the blind animal. He listened, too, not just to the familiar creak of the cart, but to the subtle shifts in the ox's breathing, the rustle of the leaves that might indicate a change in the path's direction. Every step became a conscious act of guidance. He had to anticipate, to plan, to truly see the path for both of them. There was no more following. There was only leading, with a quiet, focused intention that he had never known before. He realized, with a quiet shock, how little he had truly been seeing all these years. He had known the paths, yes, but he had known them through the oxen's eyes, through their familiar pace, through the rhythm they had established. He had been a passenger, pretending to be a pilot. Now, he was the sole navigator. The first few days were arduous. He moved more slowly, his body more tired than usual, his mind constantly alert. He stumbled sometimes, misjudged a turn, and felt the frustration rise. But each mistake taught him something new. He learned to feel the subtle shift in the air that indicated a change in elevation. He learned to use the sound of the nearby river as a continuous guide, a steady hum that oriented him even when the path turned away from its banks. He learned to trust his own senses, his own intuition, in a way he never had before. And slowly, subtly, a transformation began within him. The quiet ache of directionlessness began to recede, replaced by a deep, quiet engagement. He was no longer just moving through the landscape. He was intimately connected to it, his every sense alive to its nuances. He was no longer merely covering ground. He was truly journeying with a purpose that felt profoundly his own. The weight of the yoke, which had once felt like a burden, now felt like a conduit for his own intention, a connection to the very act of leading. One afternoon, as the sun began its gentle descent, casting long golden shadows across the fields, Raju found himself guiding his team along a particularly narrow, winding track that led to a small, isolated farm. His blind ox walked steadily, confidently, its broad back moving in sync with Raju's guiding hand. Raju's eyes, clear and focused, scanned the path ahead, noting the slight upward slope, the patch of loose stones, the overhanging branch that needed to be avoided. His movements were fluid, his commands soft yet firm. He felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep, resonant peace that had been absent for so long. As they emerged from the winding path into a small clearing, Raju saw the quiet elder from the village. She sat beneath the shade of an old banyan tree, her hands busy weaving a straw mat, her movements slow and deliberate. Her simple, earthy garments blended with the tones of the landscape. Her eyes, soft and deep, watched Raju approach, a gentle smile playing on her lips. Raju halted his team, allowing them to rest. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, a contented sigh escaping his lips. He sat on a nearby stone, the blind ox grazing peacefully on a patch of sweet grass beside him, its movements guided by Raju's occasional soft word. "You guide him well now, Raju," the elder said, her voice a gentle hum, barely disturbing the quiet air. Her hands continued their rhythmic weaving, each strand falling perfectly into place. Raju nodded, a warmth spreading through him. "I suppose I must, elder. He cannot see the path." The elder paused her weaving, her soft eyes turning to Raju, a question in their depths. "And when he could see?" she inquired, her gaze steady, yet not demanding. Raju hesitated, looking down at his strong, weathered hands, now intimately familiar with every nuance of the path, every subtle shift in the ox's gait. He thought back to the days when he had merely walked beside his team, letting the ox choose the way, his mind often adrift in its own quiet confusion. Then, he finally whispered, the quiet truth settling upon him like the evening dew. Then, I merely followed. I let him lead, thinking I was guiding. I rested my hand on the yoke, but I was not truly directing. I was only moving along. The elder's eyes returned to her weaving, her hands resuming their steady rhythm. "And is there a difference between following and truly guiding?" she asked, her voice soft, an invitation rather than a demand for an answer. Raju sat in silence for a long moment, the sounds of the evening beginning to awaken around them, the distant chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, the soft lowing of his other ox. The question hung in the air, simple yet profound. He felt the weight of his own past confusion, the lightness of his present clarity. He felt the deep connection to the path, the intimate awareness of every step. "Yes," he finally murmured, the word barely audible, yet filled with a quiet conviction. "There is a great difference. One is merely moving, the other is seeing, truly seeing." He looked up at the elder, a newfound light in his own eyes. "His blindness," Raju continued, gesturing gently towards his ox. "It was a gift. It forced me to see with my own eyes, to find my own way." The elder offered a soft, knowing smile, her hands never faltering in their work. She said nothing more, for no more words were needed. The truth had unfolded within Raju, clear and undeniable. He had been so accustomed to his external guide, so reliant on the familiar comfort of the ox's lead, that he had never developed his own inner sense of direction. The very thing he thought he had lost, his reliable guide, had in fact been the catalyst for finding what he truly needed, his own capacity to lead, to truly guide his life with attentiveness and intention. Perhaps, dear listener, you too have encountered such moments. Moments when a familiar comfort, a long-held reliance, suddenly slips away. It might be a change in a routine, a shift in a relationship, a loss of something you always thought you needed to navigate your way. In those moments of apparent loss, we often feel disoriented, even afraid. But sometimes, when the accustomed guides are no longer available, when the familiar path seems to vanish beneath our feet, that is precisely when we are invited to truly see. It is then that we are called to quiet our minds, to awaken our deeper senses, and to discover the innate capacity within us to truly lead our own lives. The path, it turns out, was always there, waiting for us to truly open our eyes and see it, not through the lens of another, but through the clear, unclouded vision of our own awakened awareness. Raju walked home that evening, the moon now high in the sky, casting a silver glow upon the path. He still guided his blind ox with gentle, precise commands, his hand resting not just for support, but for true direction. The weight of the yoke felt different now, not a burden, but a connection. The path, though familiar, seemed new, seen with new eyes, navigated with a newfound purpose. He had not changed the path, but he had changed the way he walked upon it. He had not found a new direction, but he had found the true guide within himself. And in that quiet discovery, a deep and lasting peace had finally settled in his heart. The path of discovery, once illuminated for Raju, now gently turned towards another, a woman whose hands knew the quiet dance of separation. Her name was Parvati, and her days were spent amidst the bounty of the harvest, her craft as old as the earth itself. Parvati, the winnowing woman, moved with a quiet grace, her silver-streaked black hair often escaping its neat bun to brush against her calm, strong face. Her hands, though strong from years of labor, were supple and sensitive, knowing precisely how to coax the wind to her will. With each rhythmic sway of her shallow, wide-mouthed basket, the newly harvested grain would rise, and the lighter chaff, the dust and the empty husks, would lift and drift away on the breath of the breeze, leaving behind only the rich, golden kernels. She was a master of distinction, a quiet artist of clarity, bringing order and purity to the raw yield of the fields. Yet, in the quiet chambers of her own mind, Parvati felt anything but clear. Her inner world often felt like the unseparated grain in her basket, a jumbled, tangled pile of thoughts and feelings, worries and hopes, insights and distractions, all mixed together, indistinguishable. She yearned for the same clarity within that her hands brought to the grain, a way to separate the valuable from the trivial, the essential from the fleeting, the true from the imagined. She would sit sometimes, her winnowing basket resting idle in her lap, her gaze distant, lost in the swirling currents of her own thoughts. How easily she performed her craft, her body knowing just the right flick, the perfect dip and lift to let the wind do its work. But for her own heart, for the matters that weighed on her spirit, there seemed to be no such wind, no such simple method. Everything felt mixed, tangled, inseparable. She had tried to force clarity, to shake her thoughts with an urgency that left her exhausted. She had tried to grasp individual worries, to pull them out like stubborn weeds. But the more she tried, the more confused she became, the more the entire heap seemed to resist her efforts. Sometimes, she imagined her thoughts were like tiny, invisible particles, and if only she could find a strong enough wind, a powerful gust of understanding, it would sweep away all that was unnecessary, leaving only the pure essence. She sought out higher ground, hoping to catch a stronger breeze. She experimented with baskets of different weaves, some finer, some coarser, thinking perhaps a different tool would help her sort the subtle complexities of her inner landscape. She even tried to analyze her thoughts, one by one, giving each a label, a category, hoping that by naming them, she could sort them into neat piles like sacks of different grains. But the categories seemed to blur, the labels shifted, and the piles quickly collapsed back into a single, overwhelming jumble. The more she struggled, the more frustrated she became. The quiet, gentle rhythm that guided her hands in her work seemed utterly absent from the frantic activity of her mind. She would sigh, a soft, almost inaudible sound, barely disturbing the gentle rustle of the drying grain around her. The peace that came with her daily labor, the satisfaction of seeing the pure grain emerge, was a stark contrast to the persistent disquiet within. Then came the long, still days of late summer, days when the air hung heavy and motionless. The sun beat down, warming the earth, but no breeze stirred. Not even a whisper of wind rustled the leaves of the old tamarind tree by her hut, nor rippled the surface of the slow-moving river. For Parvati, these were days of quiet despair, for without the wind, her craft was impossible. Her winnowing baskets, so finely crafted, lay unused. Piles of newly harvested grain, still mixed with dust and straw, accumulated around her, waiting for the breath of the air. The fields, usually alive with the movement of farmers and the gentle sway of ripening crops, seemed hushed, expectant, caught in a suspended moment of waiting. And within Parvati, the stillness outside found its mirror. The wind she so desperately needed to sort her grain was absent, and so too was the inner clarity she craved. The mixed pile of grain on her drying mats, gleaming under the unchanging sun, became a physical embodiment of her own bewildered mind. It was a constant, visible reminder of her inability to sort, to separate, to find the clear gold amidst the chaff of her own existence. She watched the still, mixed grain, and she felt the stillness within her. She knew, intellectually, that the valuable kernels were there, hidden amongst the husks, just as she knew that within her own mind there were thoughts of truth and wisdom, buried beneath the clutter of daily worries and fleeting concerns. But how to find them? How to bring them to light without the necessary wind, without the external force she had always relied upon? Her skilled hands, usually so busy, now rested idly in her lap, their accustomed movements stilled. Her brow often furrowed, a slight tension around her eyes as she wrestled silently with her predicament. She had always believed that separation required force, a strong breath of wind, a decisive action. But now, in the relentless stillness of the windless days, she was left with only the mixed pile and the quiet, persistent ache of her own unseparated thoughts. The frustration mounted, not with a burst of anger, but with a slow, heavy sense of helplessness. Her methods, her tools, her very understanding of how to achieve clarity, all seemed to fail her in this profound absence of movement. She longed for a shift, a stirring, a way to distinguish the precious from the discarded, not just in the grain of the earth, but in the very fabric of her own being. But the air remained still, and her thoughts remained a jumbled pile. The air remained still, and her thoughts remained a jumbled pile. The days stretched on, each one mirroring the last in its breathless calm, and Parvati's frustration, though quiet, deepened. Her skilled hands, so accustomed to purpose, now often lay still in her lap, or moved with an aimless grace, tidying what did not need tidying, folding what was already folded. The piles of unseparated grain grew, a golden testament to the wind's absence and to Parvati's own inability to find a different way. She had always relied on the outer wind, the force that cleared, the movement that distinguished. Without it, she felt paralyzed, her wisdom suddenly useless. One such afternoon, the sun, a heavy golden orb, hung directly overhead, pressing warmth into the earth and all living things. The world seemed to hold its breath. Parvati sat on the sun-baked ground beside her largest pile of mixed grain, a pile that seemed to shimmer with an almost mocking light. She had spent the morning trying to mentally separate her worries, to categorize them, to push away the less important ones. But it was like trying to separate water from water. Every effort only seemed to stir the mixture more, creating a murkier, more confusing swirl in her mind. She leaned back against the rough clay wall of her small dwelling, her eyes half closed, simply watching the shimmering pile. There was nothing else to do. No wind to winnow, no clouds to read, no urgent task to demand her practiced hands. It was in this profound stillness, this surrender to the unyielding calm, that something small and insistent caught her eye. At the very edge of the mixed grain pile, where the fine dust of the earth met the golden kernels, a tiny procession had begun. A single ant, then another, then a steady, purposeful stream of them had emerged from a crack in the dried earth. They moved with an unwavering intent, a silent, industrious current flowing towards the shimmering heap that mocked Parvati's efforts. Parvati watched, her brow still furrowed with her own inner tangle, yet her gaze now held by the minuscule drama unfolding before her. The ants were not sweeping, not sifting, not waiting for a gust of wind. They were simply choosing. Each ant, no bigger than a speck of dust itself, would approach the mixed pile. It would hesitate for a moment, its antennae twitching, exploring the textures and shapes of the different particles. Then, with an astonishing deliberation, it would single out a single grain, a perfect golden kernel, and with immense effort, begin to maneuver it. Slowly, painstakingly, it would lift the kernel, often many times its own size, and begin to carry it away, back along the precise, invisible path to its hidden home. Parvati watched, and for a long time, she saw only the smallness of their effort, the slowness of their progress. What an eternity it would take, she thought, for these tiny creatures to clear even a handful of grain. Her own hands, in a single flick of the wrist, could accomplish more in a moment than this whole colony could in an hour. It seemed an inefficient, almost foolish method. Yet they continued, tirelessly, without haste, without frustration, without any sign of giving up. She watched as one ant struggled with a particularly large kernel. It pushed, it pulled, it adjusted its grip. It did not try to lift the whole pile. It did not try to sweep away the chaff. It focused only on that one kernel. And in time, with an almost imperceptible shift, it would overcome the obstacle, and the chosen grain would begin its slow journey. Other ants, passing by, did not interfere with its struggle, nor did they try to rush it. They simply continued their own quiet, deliberate work, each focused on its own individual task. And then, a subtle recognition began to stir within Parvati. It was not a sudden burst of understanding, but a gentle unfurling, like a petal opening slowly to the sun. She had always believed that separation required a grand gesture, a forceful movement, a sweeping action. She had tried to force her thoughts to separate, to push away the unwanted, to shake her mind until clarity emerged. But these ants, they used no force at all. They used only attention. They used only patience. They did not demand a wind. They did not wait for a stronger breeze to carry away what was light. They simply focused on what was valuable, on what could be moved, on what deserved their deliberate effort. And in their slow, unyielding process, separation was happening. Not a swift, dramatic separation, but a deep, thorough, and utterly complete one. Piece by chosen piece, Parvati watched for what felt like hours. The sun slowly shifting across the sky, painting the same golden light on the industrious ants and the still, mixed grain. Her own hands, which had been resting idly, now lay open in her lap, no longer clenched in silent frustration. The tension in her brow began to soften, like clay slowly yielding to water. She thought of her own tangled thoughts, her own jumbled pile of worries and concerns. She had tried to find a powerful wind, a strong gust of insight that would sweep away all the confusion at once. But what if there was no such wind? What if the path to clarity was not through force, but through this quiet, deliberate selection? What if it was not about sweeping away the chaff, but about patiently, mindfully choosing the kernel? The ants did not judge the chaff. They did not rail against its presence. They simply turned their attention to the grain. They did not try to separate everything at once. They focused on one thing, and then another, and then another. It was an act of pure, sustained attention, a quiet awareness of what was before them, and a deliberate, unhurried choice. And in that quiet observation, Parvati realized that the inner wind she so desperately sought might not be a gust of force at all. It might be this very stillness. It might be this patient, focused attention. It might be the deliberate choice to gently pick out one thought, to examine it without judgment, to understand its nature, and then, if it served no purpose, to simply let it be, turning her attention to the next. Not by shaking or forcing, but by observing, by discerning, by choosing. This was sati, she realized, though she did not know the word. It was the present awareness, the quiet mindfulness of each tiny piece, each fleeting thought, each small sensation. It was the wisdom of not trying to control the entire heap, but of focusing on the individual components. It was the understanding that sometimes the most profound separation, the clearest distinction, comes not from a powerful external force, but from a gentle internal focus. Parvati took a deep breath, the first truly deep breath she had taken in days, and it felt as if the air itself, though still, was now imbued with a new kind of clarity. She looked at her own hands, those skilled hands that knew the dance of the winnowing basket. They were capable of delicate, precise movements. They knew how to choose. They knew how to hold. She looked back at the ants, still moving, still choosing, still carrying their precious burdens. Their progress was slow, yes, but it was undeniable. And in their method, there was no exhaustion, no frustration, only the steady, unceasing flow of quiet purpose. The mixed pile of grain still lay before her, vast and daunting, but it no longer felt mocking. It felt like an invitation not to struggle against its complexity, but to approach it with a new kind of patience, a new kind of attention. The valuable kernels were indeed there, hidden amongst the husks, just as the truths of her own heart lay beneath the surface of her tangled thoughts. And now, she had seen a different way to find them. She imagined her own thoughts, not as a jumbled, overwhelming mass, but as individual grains. And she imagined her own mind, not as a battlefield where she wrestled with confusion, but as a quiet field where she could patiently, deliberately choose what truly mattered. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in soft hues, but the air remained still. Parvati did not pick up her winnowing basket. She did not try to force a wind that was not there. Instead, she sat for a while longer, her hands now resting peacefully in her lap, her gaze fixed on the tiny, tireless ants. And in that quiet, windless afternoon, a profound and gentle shift began to take place within her. The clarity she sought was not to be found in the sweeping force of a gale, but in the focused, patient stillness of a single, discerning moment. The path to sorting her own inner landscape, she now understood, was not about creating a strong wind, but about cultivating a quiet, persistent attention, one gentle, deliberate choice at a time. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges, a different kind of light began to appear in the village. Small, warm glows flickered in windows, chasing away the encroaching dusk. And behind many of those lights, unseen, was the quiet work of Chandra. Chandra was the lamp oil seller, a man whose days were spent pouring liquid light into earthenware vessels, measuring it out for families, for merchants, for the temple and the quiet homes. His hands, perpetually stained with the faint scent of sesame or mustard oil, were steady and practiced. He knew the precise weight of a full lamp, the smooth coolness of a clay pot brimming with the clear golden fluid. He brought illumination to every corner of the village, a necessary warmth against the encroaching darkness of night. Yet, for all the light he sold, Chandra himself felt shrouded in a persistent internal gloom. It was a darkness that no lamp could dispel, a shadow that clung to the corners of his mind, untouched by the brightest flame. He would walk through the village at dusk, seeing the lights he had provided spilling from doorways, hearing the quiet chatter of families gathered around their evening glow, and a deep, quiet ache would settle in his chest. He was a dealer in light, a purveyor of brightness, yet his own soul felt like an empty lamp, unable to hold the very glow he offered to others. He had tried, of course, to bring light to his own life. More than anyone, he had access to the finest oils, the clearest, purest kinds that promised the longest, steadiest burn. He would set aside large quantities for his own home, carefully storing it in cool, dark corners, imagining that its very presence, its stored potential, might somehow chase away his inner shadows. He would fill a lamp, then another, until his small dwelling was bathed in a brilliant, almost defiant glow. But the more lamps he lit, the more he felt the emptiness within. The light, instead of dispelling the gloom, seemed only to highlight its presence, making the absence of inner warmth even more stark. The shadows danced on the walls, intensified by the multiple sources, and Chandra would sit amidst the flickering brilliance, feeling only a deeper sense of isolation. The external light, however abundant, seemed to have no power over the quiet, unyielding darkness that resided in his heart. He experimented with wicks. Perhaps the problem was in the drawing of the oil, the way it met the flame. He sought out the finest cotton, spun it himself into thin, perfectly braided strands, believing that if the wick was just right, the flame would burn brighter, purer, and somehow that intense brightness would seep into his own spirit. He spent hours, late into the night, adjusting, trimming, hoping. He would watch the flame intently, its tiny dance a mystery he felt compelled to solve, believing that if he could perfect its form, he could perfect his own inner state. He tried different oils too. Oil from the mustard seed, with its sharp, clean scent. Oil from the sesame, with its richer, more mellow glow. He sought out rare oils from distant lands, oils whispered to possess special properties, a unique ability to banish shadows. He would burn them, one after another, in his most precious lamps, watching their light, inhaling their scents, searching for the particular alchemy that would finally touch his own inner darkness. But each new oil, each new wick, each new lamp brought only the same quiet disappointment. The light remained outside him, a commodity he could sell, but not possess in the way he truly craved. Sometimes he would hoard the oil, not selling as much as he could, justifying it by saying he needed it for his own testing. He would watch the amber liquid swirl in the large clay pots, imagining that its stored light might somehow transfer to him by proximity, by possession. He would place his hands on the cool clay, feeling the weight of the oil, willing its brightness to enter him. But the warmth he felt was only the warmth of his own skin, and the light remained stubbornly within the pot, a separate entity. He was a man consumed by the very thing he offered to others. He spent his days thinking of light, measuring light, pouring light, yet his inner world remained stubbornly unlit. He yearned for a light that was not for sale, a light that did not diminish with each passing hour, a light that did not require a wick or a flame, but simply was. He longed for a kind of illumination that was not dependent on his efforts, his measurements, his careful preparations. The villagers depended on his oil, their lives made easier, their evenings prolonged by the light he provided. They spoke of the good fortune of having Chandra, the diligent oil seller, in their midst. They praised his reliable supply, his fair prices, the consistent quality of his lamps. But they did not see the darkness that settled behind his own eyes, a darkness that grew heavier with each lamp he filled for another. They did not see the quiet desperation that clung to him, like the scent of oil to his clothes. He would often sit by his window in the deepest part of the night, long after the last customer had departed, long after his own lamps had burned low and been refilled. He would gaze out at the village, a scattering of small, warm lights against the vast, inky blackness. Each light was a testament to his trade, a small victory against the night. Yet he felt no victory within himself. He felt only the persistent, quiet ache of his own unlit interior. The more he tried to manufacture light, the deeper the shadows seemed to become, not around him, but within him. It was a quiet ache, a persistent longing for something he could not bottle, could not measure, could not sell. He had all the ingredients for light, all the means to create it. Yet the true light, the kind that warmed the soul and banished internal gloom, remained elusive. He was surrounded by light, yet he lived in shadow. He sold light, but could not buy it for himself, and in the quiet of his lamplit home, Chandra longed for a source of illumination that required no oil, no wick, no purchase, a light that simply existed, freely given, eternally bright, waiting to be seen. Chandra yearned for a light that was not for sale, a light that did not diminish with each passing hour, a light that did not require a wick or a flame, but simply was. He longed for a kind of illumination that was not dependent on his efforts, his measurements, his careful preparations. This longing was a persistent whisper in the quiet chambers of his heart, a constant echo beneath the daily clang of his oil canisters and the soft slosh of liquid light. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fleeting shades of orange and rose, a sudden, urgent message arrived. A neighboring village, nestled deep within the shadowed folds of the hills, had been struck by an unexpected illness. Many were afflicted, and a particular herbal remedy, known only to a reclusive healer who lived even further into the mountains, was desperately needed. The messenger, a young boy breathless from his hurried journey, explained that the healer's hut was almost impossible to find in the dark and the path treacherous. They needed someone with a keen eye, someone used to navigating by the dimmest light, someone who knew the land. They had thought of Chandra, the oil seller, whose trade was light, whose presence was a comfort in the dark. Chandra hesitated. His own lamps were low, his oil stores depleted from the day's sales. He had been preparing for a quiet evening, his customary vigil against his inner gloom. But the urgency in the boy's eyes, the quiet desperation in his voice, stirred something within him. This was not about selling light. This was about offering aid. He quickly gathered a few coins for the healer, a small pouch of dried fruit, and a flask of water. In his haste, he did not even think to grab a lamp. His mind was solely focused on the task, the journey, the need. He stepped out into the rapidly deepening twilight, leaving behind the familiar glow of his home and the heavy burden of his unlit self. The path began as a familiar track, well worn by travelers and carts. Chandra walked with a determined stride, his thoughts focused on the sick, on the healer, on the urgent purpose of his journey. But as he left the village behind, the path grew narrower, less distinct, weaving its way through stands of silent trees, across murmuring streams, and up the winding slopes of the hills. The last vestiges of twilight faded, swallowed by the vast, encompassing darkness of the open countryside. He stumbled once, then twice, his foot catching on an unseen root, his hand brushing against the rough bark of a tree he hadn't known was there. A familiar wave of despair threatened to engulf him. How could he, who provided light for others, be so utterly lost in the dark himself? He reached for his belt, for the familiar weight of a lamp that was not there. He paused, his breath catching in his throat, the silence of the night pressing in around him. His inner darkness, already a persistent companion, seemed to deepen, mirroring the impenetrable blackness of the world outside. He felt a profound sense of helplessness, a stark reminder of his dependence on the very commodity he sold. Without his lamps, without his oil, he was truly blind, truly lost. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cool night air wash over his face, trying to calm the rising panic within him. When he opened them again slowly, a subtle shift had occurred. His eyes, no longer straining against the darkness, began to adjust. What had seemed an absolute void now held faint, shimmering distinctions. The outlines of the trees, once mere shadows, began to take on a soft, undefined shape. The path, though still dim, was no longer entirely invisible. And then he looked up. He had been so focused on the ground before him, on the immediate, tangible path, on the absence of his lamp, that he had forgotten to lift his gaze. Above him, spread across the immense canvas of the night, was a tapestry of shimmering light. Countless stars, like scattered diamonds, glittered with an ancient, unwavering brilliance. The moon, a sliver of silver, cast a gentle, diffused glow over the land, painting the hills in shades of muted gray and indigo. The sky was vast, clear, and breathtakingly bright. Chandra stood still, his head tilted back, his eyes wide with a quiet astonishment. He could see perfectly. The path before him, though winding and uneven, was now visible, illuminated not by a contained, manufactured flame, but by the boundless, effortless light of the heavens. He could discern the faint indentations of footsteps, the subtle curve of the earth, the darker patches where shadows pooled beneath the larger rocks. The light was soft, pervasive, and utterly sufficient. He began to walk again, slowly at first, then with a newfound confidence. Each step was guided by the starlight, by the pale glow of the moon. There was no flicker, no smoke, no need to trim a wick or refill a reservoir. The light simply was. It was everywhere, surrounding him, guiding him, illuminating his way without effort, without cost, without his intervention. He had been so busy creating light, so consumed with selling it, with measuring it, with perfecting its container, that he had entirely overlooked the magnificent free abundance of the sky. The realization settled upon him with the quiet grace of falling stardust. All his frantic efforts, all his hoarding, his multiple lamps, his experiments with wicks and oils, they had all been an attempt to manufacture what was already present, freely given. He had believed light was a commodity, something to be bought and sold, created and controlled. He had believed his inner darkness was a problem to be solved with more external illumination, a void to be filled by his own diligent efforts. But the light of the stars, the gentle silver of the moon, asked for nothing. It simply shone. It illuminated the world, not with a focused, intense beam, but with a soft, embracing glow that allowed everything to be seen, not forced into stark relief. The shadows were still there, of course, but they were not threatening. They were simply part of the landscape, softened by the ambient light, giving depth and form to the hills and valleys. He had spent his life dealing in light, yet he had been blind to its truest, most profound source. He had been so focused on the means of light, the oil, the wick, the lamp, that he had forgotten the very essence of light itself. It was not something to be contained, but something to be received. It was not something to be created, but something to be acknowledged. As he walked, guided by the celestial glow, a quiet warmth began to spread within his own chest. It was not the sudden, intense heat of a newly lit lamp, but a gentle, pervasive radiance, like the slow dawn breaking within him. The internal darkness he had carried for so long did not vanish in a dramatic flash. Instead, it softened, receded, no longer feeling like an oppressive void, but simply a part of the vastness, given perspective by the newly perceived light. He thought of his home, filled with the many lamps he had painstakingly lit, each one a monument to his struggle. He remembered the feeling of deeper isolation amidst their combined brilliance. Now, walking under the open sky, bathed in the natural light of the universe, he felt a profound sense of connection, of being part of something immense and effortlessly luminous. The light he craved had always been there, not hidden away in a bottle, but spread across the infinite expanse, waiting for him to simply look up and see. The path to the healer's hut, though still long, felt less arduous. Chandra's steps were lighter, his mind clearer. He understood now that true illumination was not something he could hoard or sell, not something he could force into being. It was a gift, freely offered, always present, whether he carried a lamp or not. His frantic efforts to create light had, paradoxically, kept him from seeing the light that already existed, boundless and free. He had been so busy lighting his small, manufactured flames that he had forgotten the sun, the moon, the stars. The journey continued, a quiet pilgrimage under the silent, watchful eyes of the cosmos. Chandra found the healer's hut with surprising ease, guided by a faint wisp of smoke rising against the starlit sky. The exchange was brief, the remedy secured. As he turned to begin his return journey, he paused, looking up once more at the dazzling expanse above him. The stars seemed to twinkle with a knowing benevolence, their silent brilliance a gentle reminder of the truth he had just uncovered. He walked back towards his village, the darkness no longer a source of fear or despair, but a canvas upon which the starlight could paint its quiet wonders. The light within him was not a manufactured flame, but a growing awareness, a gentle recognition of the inherent brightness that permeated all things, including himself. He had spent a lifetime trying to buy or sell light, only to discover that the most profound illumination was always present, always free, always waiting to be seen, not created. It was like the starlight itself, shining whether we light our lamps or not, simply awaiting the quiet opening of our eyes and the gentle letting go of our manufactured solutions. The true light, like true wisdom, was not a possession, but a perception. It was not about adding something, but about recognizing what was already there, abundantly, effortlessly. Chandra, the oil seller, had finally seen beyond his lamps, beyond his oil, to the vast, unending source of light that required nothing but his quiet attention. And in that seeing, a quiet peace began to unfold within him, a gentle warmth that promised to glow, not flicker, against the retreating shadows. The world had not changed, but Chandra's way of seeing it, and himself, had shifted ever so subtly under the benevolent gaze of the ancient, silent stars. The starlight faded with the approach of dawn, yielding its quiet dominion to the first blush of a new day. The sky softened from inky indigo to a delicate lavender, then to a hopeful rose, as the sun, a nascent ember, began to warm the distant peaks. With the light came the sounds of the village stirring, the distant lowing of an ox, the quiet crackle of a morning fire, and the gentle chirping of birds welcoming the returning sun. In another part of the village, where the fields stretched wide and green, lived a man named Vimal. His days, like the sun's steady climb, followed a predictable rhythm. Vimal was the village's grass cutter, a man whose strong, calloused hands knew the precise balance of a scythe and the whisper of a blade through dew-kissed stalks. Each morning, as the mist still clung to the lowlands, Vimal would walk to the fields, his sharpened scythe resting easily on his shoulder. His work was essential, providing thatch for roofs, fodder for livestock, and a quiet, ordered beauty to the edges of the village. The rhythm of his work was almost meditative, the steady swing of his body, the swift, clean arc of the blade, the soft swish as a swathe of grass fell to the earth. It was a dance he had performed for countless seasons, a familiar, comforting motion that connected him to the earth and its cycles. Yet, beneath this outward calm, a quiet anxiety had begun to take root in Vimal's heart, growing like a stubborn weed in a well-tended field. With each swing of his scythe, with each bundle of vibrant green grass he gathered, Vimal felt a subtle, unsettling tremor. He looked at the fallen stalks, so full of life just moments before, now lying prone, destined to dry, to become brittle, to nourish or to cover, but never to stand tall and green again. And in that simple act of cutting, Vimal saw a reflection of his own life, a quiet shortening, a hastening of his own years. He was not an old man, not yet, but the first silver threads had begun to appear in his dark hair, and the lines around his eyes deepened with each passing season. He felt the subtle stiffness in his joints after a long day's work, a persistent ache in his back that had not been there in his youth. And as he cut the grass, vibrant and full of green promise, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not just taking from the field, but also from himself. Each cut felt like a small subtraction from his own dwindling store of vitality, a silent tally of the days that were passing, never to return. The thought, once a fleeting shadow, now clung to him like the morning mist, damp and persistent. He watched the grass so full, so alive, and then he watched it fall, and in its descent, he saw his own inevitable decline. He understood the necessity of his work. The village depended on him, but the more he cut, the more he felt this quiet dread, this creeping certainty that he was hastening the end, not just of the grass, but of his own vibrant green years. He began to subtly alter his methods, hoping to appease this gnawing fear, to somehow preserve something vital, both in the field and within himself. He would cut less, leaving wider patches of uncut grass than was his custom. He would tell himself it was for the birds, or to allow the field to rest. But in his heart, he knew he was trying to slow the process, to somehow keep more life standing, to resist the finality of the blade. But then, the uncut patches would grow unruly, making his work seem unfinished, and the villagers would gently inquire if he was feeling well, or if the grass was simply too dense for his blade. He would nod, offer a quiet excuse, and the anxiety would only deepen, for his efforts to preserve only highlighted his perceived failing. Sometimes he would try to cut more gently, as if the lightness of his touch could somehow negate the sharpness of the blade. He would slow his swing, let the scythe kiss the stalks rather than cleave them with force. But the grass, regardless of his gentleness, still fell. And the act of trying to be gentle only made him more aware of the inherent violence of the cut, the stark reality of separation. The blade, for all his efforts, remained a tool of ending, a symbol of what was lost. He even began to choose only the youngest, most tender blades, leaving the mature, seed-bearing stalks to stand. Perhaps, he reasoned, by taking only the nascent life, he was not truly diminishing the field's overall strength. Perhaps by cutting the young, the old would be preserved. But this, too, brought its own quiet confusion. The young grass, though abundant, was less substantial, providing less fodder, less thatch, and the older, tougher stalks, left standing, would eventually wither and fall anyway, unharvested, a waste. He was trying to outwit the cycles, to bend them to his will, to prevent the inevitable decline he saw mirrored in his own life. Vimal would spend long hours in the fields, the sun warming his back, the scent of fresh-cut grass filling the air, a smell that once brought him contentment, but now carried a faint undertone of melancholy. He watched the clouds drift across the wide sky, ephemeral and ever-changing, and thought of his own days, drifting by, each one a little shorter, a little more distant from the spring of his youth. The grass, so green, so full of promise, would eventually turn brown, dry, and return to the earth. And so too, he felt, would he. His quiet anxiety was a constant companion, a soft hum beneath the rhythm of his work. He wanted to hold on to the greenness, to arrest the ceaseless march of time, to find a way to cut without losing, to live without diminishing. But every swing of his scythe, every fallen blade, every passing season seemed to whisper the same truth. Everything that lives must also yield, must also diminish, must also pass away. He sat sometimes at the edge of the field, his scythe resting beside him, the setting sun painting the uncut grass in hues of gold and amber. He would observe the tiny insects crawling through the blades, the gentle sway of the stalks in the evening breeze. He saw the abundance, the endless growth, the vitality. Yet his gaze would always return to the cut swath, the emptiness where the grass had been, the space that seemed to yawn with what was no longer there. He was so focused on the loss, on the inevitable shortening, that the vibrant, living field around him, teeming with new life, often faded from his awareness. He yearned for a different understanding, a way to reconcile his work, which was so intimately tied to ending, with his deep desire for continuity, for life. He wanted to see beyond the cut, beyond the diminishing, to find a way for his heart to feel full, even as the seasons turned and the years accumulated. He felt that his very hands, skilled as they were in the act of taking, were unwittingly participating in the slow, quiet erosion of his own vibrant existence. And so, Vimal, the grass cutter, continued his work, his blade swinging, his heart heavy with the fear that each cut, each passing moment, brought him closer to an emptiness he could not fill, a shortening he could not lengthen. He was caught in the cycle, providing life for others by performing an act that, for him, felt like a constant, quiet surrender to loss. Yet, as the seasons turned, as the sun climbed higher in the spring sky, then dipped lower into the long, warm embrace of summer, and finally began its slow descent into the crisp, cooling breath of autumn, something remarkable began to unfold in the fields Vimal tended. It was not a sudden revelation, like a clap of thunder after a long drought, but a slow, quiet dawning, like the first pale light of morning painting the eastern sky, imperceptibly brightening until the world was bathed in a gentle glow. Vimal continued his work, the familiar rhythm of his scythe a steady hum against the backdrop of chirping crickets and rustling leaves. His hands still moved with the practiced grace of long years. His back still bore the familiar ache, and his mind, though still harboring the quiet anxieties of shortening and diminishing, began to open itself to a different kind of observation. He had been so focused on what was lost, on the space where the grass had been, that he had overlooked the profound, persistent insistence of what was returning. He had cut a large section of the meadow, a wide swathe that had, for a time, appeared barren, a stark contrast to the verdant growth around it. He had walked away, feeling the familiar pang of loss, the sense that he had, once again, taken from the earth, leaving it emptier. But then, weeks later, as he returned to the same field to gather fodder from a different section, his gaze drifted back to that once cleared patch, and what he saw caused him to pause, his scythe resting idly in his hand, his eyes widening with a slow, quiet wonder. The grass he had cut, the very stalks he had believed were gone forever, had returned, not merely in scattered, hesitant blades, but in a vibrant, uniform carpet of green, even thicker, even stronger than before. The new shoots pushed through the soil with an eager vitality, their color a deeper, richer hue, their stalks standing more resiliently against the gentle breeze. It was as if the very act of cutting had not diminished them, but had instead awakened a deeper strength, a hidden reservoir of life within the earth itself. He walked into the regrown patch, his sturdy boots sinking slightly into the soft, rich earth. He bent down, his fingers brushing against the tips of the new grass. It felt different somehow, more robust, more alive. He remembered the older, tougher stalks he had sometimes left standing, fearing to cut them. Those had eventually withered, fallen, and become brittle, contributing little to the field's vitality. But the areas he had harvested, the areas he had cleared with his blade, were now teeming with a renewed vigor, a fresh abundance that seemed to hum with quiet energy. This observation, at first a flicker, then a steady flame, began to subtly reshape Vimal's understanding. He had always seen his scythe as a tool of taking, a bringer of endings. But what if, he now mused, it was also a catalyst for beginnings? What if the act of cutting was not a subtraction, but a necessary preparation? The harvest, he began to see, was not merely an ending, but a vital, vibrant part of the cycle of renewal. The field did not diminish with his work. It flourished. It did not lose its life. It transformed it, invigorated it, made it more abundant. He remembered his attempts to cut less, to cut more gently, to choose only the youngest blades. Those efforts, born of fear, had left the field uneven, sometimes less productive, less vibrant. The untouched patches had become overgrown, their growth stagnant, their life force dispersed. It was the cutting, the clearing, the deliberate act of letting go of the old that seemed to allow the new, stronger life to emerge with such force and beauty. The field, in its quiet wisdom, seemed to be teaching him a profound truth, that sometimes, to gain, one must first release. To grow, one must first be pruned. Vimal began to watch the fields with new eyes, not just focusing on the act of cutting, but on the entire magnificent dance of growth and renewal. He saw how the very act of clearing space allowed the sunlight to penetrate more deeply, how the removal of old growth encouraged the soil to release new nutrients, how the cycle of taking and returning created a richer, more fertile ground for what was yet to come. The grass did not cling to its old form. It yielded, it transformed, it returned with renewed strength. And in this ceaseless, effortless flow, there was no true loss, only an ongoing, vibrant transformation. And then, slowly, gently, this understanding began to stretch beyond the fields, beyond the grass, and into the quiet landscape of Vimal's own heart. If the field was strengthened by the cycles of cutting and regrowth, by the effort of his work, and the letting go of what had been, could his own life, too, be strengthened by its own cycles? Could the passage of years, the subtle changes in his body, the lines etched around his eyes, be not merely a shortening, but a preparation for a different kind of growth, a deeper, more resilient kind of wisdom? He had feared the diminishing, the passing away, the inevitable decline. He had seen the silver threads in his hair, the stiffness in his joints as signs of loss. But what if these too were part of a larger cycle, an encouragement for something new to emerge? What if the old growth of his youth, with its boundless energy and singular focus, needed to be cut to allow for a richer, more grounded strength to take root? Perhaps the quiet aches, the slower pace, were not a surrender to emptiness, but an invitation to a deeper, more mindful presence, a different way of being in the world. He began to muse that perhaps the very act of living, with its constant flow of experience, its inevitable changes, its moments of effort, and its necessities of release, was itself a form of cultivation. His work, which he had once seen as a constant reminder of loss, now seemed to mirror the very essence of life's enduring vitality. The effort he put into his work, the steady swing of his scythe, the sweat on his brow, was not draining him, but connecting him to this fundamental rhythm of renewal. And the letting go, the allowing of the old to pass, was not an act of diminishment, but an essential part of allowing the new to flourish. The quiet anxiety that had clung to him like morning mist began to dissipate, replaced by a soft, warm sense of acceptance. He still saw the grass fall beneath his blade, but now he also saw the promise of its return, the certainty of its renewal. He understood that life was not about holding on to what was, but about embracing the constant, gentle flow of what is and what is becoming. The fear of ending began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet appreciation for the beauty of transformation, the wisdom embedded in the cycle itself. Vimal, the grass cutter, would still sit at the edge of the field as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. But now, his gaze lingered not on the empty space of what was cut, but on the vibrant, resilient green of the new growth, shimmering in the evening light. He felt his own life not as a dwindling store, but as a field perpetually renewed, strengthened by its own cycles. Flourishing through the very acts of effort and release, he understood, with a quiet, profound certainty, that true life, like the grass in his fields, was not diminished by the blade, but encouraged to grow, thicker, stronger, more abundantly than before. His hands, once heavy with the fear of taking, now moved with a lighter, more knowing touch, understanding that his work was not an act of ending, but a gentle, vital participation in life's endless, beautiful unfolding. Jaya, the maker of mud bricks, had watched Vimal's fields with a quiet, distant understanding. She saw the renewal, the relentless cycle of growth and release. She saw the truth of things returning, stronger, more vibrant. But in her own heart, a different kind of fear still held sway. For Jaya, the river was not a giver of life, but a taker of form. Her days were spent by its banks, her hands always busy, kneading the wet earth, pressing it into molds, leaving the nascent bricks to bake in the sun's steady warmth. Each brick was a small victory against the ceaseless flow, a temporary assertion of permanence in a world that constantly sought to dissolve. She had always believed in the power of form, in the necessity of holding shape. Her life felt fragile, like the unbaked clay, and she feared that without constant effort, without the diligent shaping and drying, she too would return to the formless mud from which she had come. She saw the river's currents, swift and strong, as a constant threat, a reminder of the inevitable dissolution that awaited all things. She stacked her bricks high, creating walls of brown, sun-hardened earth, each one a testament to her quiet defiance, a fortress against the encroaching chaos she perceived as the natural state of things. She had experimented with different clay mixtures, seeking a firmer, more resilient blend that would withstand the touch of water. She had tried new drying methods, building small, sheltered kilns of branches and leaves, hoping to bake her bricks harder, to imbue them with an unbreakable strength. She had even fashioned stronger frames for her stacks, lashing them together with stout ropes, as if to physically hold her creations, and by extension, herself, together. But despite her efforts, despite her tireless work, the quiet anxiety persisted. With each passing season, each rain that softened the earth, each brush of the wind that carried away a fine dust, Jaya felt her own life subtly shifting, subtly dissolving, becoming formless, like the mud in the water, losing shape with each passing season. She would watch the older, half-dissolved bricks along the riverbank, remnants of forgotten seasons, slowly returning to the earth. A deep sigh would escape her lips, a sound barely audible above the gentle lapping of the river against the shore. She saw them not as a return, but as a loss, a fading away into nothingness. She felt a kinship with them, a quiet dread that her own essence, her own story, would one day simply wash away, leaving no trace, no form, no lasting mark. The fear of impermanence was a heavy cloak she wore, and her bricks, so solid and reassuring to the touch, were her desperate attempt to throw it off. Then, as the humid season drew near, the air grew heavy with a familiar tension. The river, usually a gentle ribbon of silver, began to swell, its surface darkening, its currents quickening. The scent of damp earth grew stronger, mingling with the sweet, cloying smell of decaying leaves. Jaya knew what was coming. The annual floods, a time of both fear and reluctant awe, were on their way. She worked with a renewed urgency, her hands moving faster, her brow furrowed with concern. She molded more bricks, stacked them higher, trying to outpace the inevitable, to create enough solidity to withstand the coming surge. She built small mounds, hoping to lift her precious creations above the water's reach, a futile, desperate effort. The sky, usually a brilliant blue, began to take on a bruised purplish hue. Distant thunder rumbled, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the very ground beneath her feet. And then the rains came. Not a gentle shower, but a torrent, a relentless downpour that hammered the earth, churning the river into a furious, muddy brown. Jaya retreated to her small hut, but her gaze was constantly drawn to the river, to her stacks of bricks, standing like vulnerable sentinels against the rising tide. The water rose steadily, inexorably. It crept up the riverbank, first touching the lowest bricks, then engulfing them completely. Jaya watched, her heart a heavy stone in her chest, as the water swirled around her creations, softening their edges, blurring their sharp lines. The ropes she had used to bind them began to fray, then snap, releasing individual bricks to the mercy of the current. It was not a sudden, violent destruction, but a slow, patient undoing, a gentle erosion that was all the more profound for its quiet persistence. She watched as the carefully formed shapes, the products of her diligent hands, began to dissolve. The sun-baked surfaces softened, the clay returning to its original formless state. Some broke apart, crumbling into smaller pieces that were then carried away by the river's strong embrace. Others simply melted, their defined edges blurring, sinking back into the riverbed, becoming one with the very earth from which they had been drawn. The walls she had built, the symbols of her struggle against impermanence, were slowly, beautifully returning to their source. A profound weariness settled over Jaya. Her efforts, her fears, her desperate attempts to hold on, all seemed to have been in vain. The river, in its effortless flow, had simply reclaimed what was its own. There was no anger in its movement, no malice, just a quiet, undeniable truth. Everything that rises must return. Everything that takes form must eventually dissolve. Her bricks, once solid and distinct, were now indistinguishable from the rich, fertile mud of the riverbank itself. As the days passed and the floodwaters began to recede, leaving behind a thick, dark layer of silt, Jaya ventured out. The sky was clear again, a brilliant, washed clean blue. The sun, warm and gentle, began to dry the land. She walked to the riverbank, to the place where her stacks of bricks had stood. There was nothing left of them, no discernible form, only the smooth, dark, freshly laid mud. A deep sadness welled within her, a sense of profound loss. She sat down, her hands resting in the cool, damp earth, feeling its soft, yielding texture. It was the same mud, she realized, that she had once shaped with such fervent hope for permanence. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence of the aftermath wash over her. When she opened them again, her gaze fell upon something small, something utterly unexpected. Pushing through the rich, dark mud, tiny green shoots were emerging. They were delicate, almost invisible against the vastness of the riverbank, but undeniably present. Small, vibrant sprouts, reaching for the newly returned sun. Here and there, a patch of tiny leaves, glistening with residual moisture, pushing upwards, finding their way through the dissolved remnants of her bricks. New life, not just one or two, but many, scattered across the entire expanse where her creations had once stood. Jaya leaned closer, her fingers gently touching a tiny leaf. It was so fragile, so tender, yet so resilient. And then, a profound understanding, soft as the morning light, began to dawn within her. The dissolution, which she had so feared, had not been an ending. It had been a preparation. The returning of her bricks to the earth, the very act of their melting back into formlessness, had not been a loss, but a transformation. They had enriched the soil, providing a fertile bed for these new beginnings. What she had seen as a void, and emptiness, was in fact a space of boundless possibility. The river had not taken her forms away to punish her or to erase her efforts. It had, in its own quiet wisdom, simply returned them to their source, allowing them to become something new. The mud, once shaped into a brick that resisted change, was now nurturing life that embraced it, pushing upwards, unfurling with an effortless grace. The dissolution was not a failure of form, but an essential part of the cycle of renewal, a vital step in the endless dance of life. She began to see that what seemed to be lost was merely changing form. The bricks were not gone. They had simply transformed, becoming part of the riverbank, part of the soil, part of the nourishment for these new, tender sprouts. The impermanence she had so feared was not a destroyer, but a constant, gentle flow, a ceaseless movement that brought forth new shapes, new life, new possibilities. Her meticulous forming of bricks, her desperate attempts to hold on to permanence, had been a misunderstanding. True strength, she now understood, lay not in rigid form, but in the willingness to yield, to dissolve, to return to the source, to allow for new growth. The emptiness she had associated with loss was, in fact, the very space from which all newness arose. It was a fertile emptiness, a vibrant nothingness, pregnant with potential. Jaya sat for a long time by the river, watching the tiny green shoots unfurl, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin, listening to the gentle gurgle of the water as it continued its timeless journey. The quiet anxiety that had gripped her heart for so long began to release its hold. The fear of dissolving, of losing her own shape, began to soften, like the clay returning to mud. Perhaps her own life, too, was not meant to be a rigid, unyielding form, but a constant, gentle flow, always changing, always transforming, always returning to the source to allow for new growth, new understanding. She understood now that the passage of time, the changes in her body, the shifts in her memories, were not a dissolution into nothingness, but a preparation for new forms of being, new ways of experiencing the world. Like the mud that nurtures the plant, her own changing self was constantly becoming, constantly renewing, always holding the potential for something fresh and vibrant to emerge. Her hands, once heavy with the desire to create lasting forms, now felt lighter, more open. She would still make bricks, for it was her craft, her way of contributing to the village. But now, she would approach her work with a different heart, with a deeper understanding. She would see each brick not as an eternal monument, but as a temporary expression of form, beautiful in its moment, but ultimately destined to return, to dissolve, to nourish the next wave of life. The dissolution was not an end, but a transformation, and in that constant, gentle flow, Jaya found a quiet peace, a profound acceptance of the beautiful, endless unfolding of all things. The river, once a symbol of fear, now became a teacher, its ceaseless movement a mirror to the wisdom of life itself, always returning, always renewing, always becoming. The river, once a symbol of fear, now became a teacher, its ceaseless movement a mirror to the wisdom of life itself, always returning, always renewing, always becoming. And so, the quiet wisdom of the river flowed onward, carrying with it the lessons of change and transformation, until its gentle current led us to another village, nestled among fields of cotton, where the air hummed with the rhythmic whir of spinning wheels. Here lived old Kamini, whose fingers knew every fiber of cotton, whose life had been spent coaxing softness into strength, fluff into unbroken thread. Kamini was a woman whose hands were a testament to decades of patient work. Her skin was soft and lined, her joints a little stiff with the years, but her touch on the cotton was as delicate and precise as a whisper. Each morning, she would take her seat by the window, the sunlight falling upon her spinning wheel, casting long, dancing shadows. She would select a tuft of raw cotton, soft as a cloud, and with a practiced flick of her wrist, begin to draw out the fibers, feeding them into the whirring spindle. The wheel would turn, a steady, soothing sound, and from her seemingly effortless movements, a thin, strong thread would emerge, growing longer and longer, coiling itself onto the bobbin. She spun thread for her entire village, strong threads for weaving sturdy cloth, fine threads for delicate embroidery, thick threads for mending nets and sacks. Each strand was a testament to her skill, a continuous, unbroken line, carefully crafted to hold together. Her neighbors relied on her threads, knowing they would not break, would not fray, would not disappoint. Yet, as Kamini spun the strong, unbroken strands for others, she felt a quiet, persistent unease settle deep within her. It was as if the thread of her own life, the story of Kamini herself, was slowly, subtly unraveling. Her memories, once clear and vibrant, now seemed to fray at the edges, like old cloth worn thin by time. Moments from her youth, faces of loved ones, the details of events that had shaped her, would drift in and out, refusing to hold their form, refusing to connect in a continuous, coherent story. She would try to grasp them, these fleeting fragments of her past, to pull them together, to weave them into a whole. But the harder she tried, the more elusive they became, like wisps of smoke dissolving in the air. Who was Kamini if her own story would not hold together? If the threads of her past, her present, her very essence seemed to be coming undone? "I must spin tighter," she would murmur to herself, her voice barely audible over the hum of the wheel. And so, she would press harder, her fingers gripping the fibers with a little more force, drawing them out with greater tension. She would watch the thread coil onto the bobbin, inspecting it closely, seeking any sign of weakness, any hint of a break. She would choose the longest, strongest fibers from her basket, believing that if the raw material was superior, the resulting thread of her life would also be unyielding. She experimented with different spinning wheels, seeking one that offered a smoother, more consistent draw, one that promised an unbreakable strand. She tried an old wheel passed down from her grandmother, whose wood was smooth and dark with age, hoping its ancient wisdom would somehow infuse her own unraveling narrative with strength. But the old wheel, despite its comforting creak, could not mend the growing gaps in her memory, nor quiet the sense of disunity within her. Then she tried a new wheel, recently acquired from a traveling merchant, its metal parts gleaming, its action swift and precise. It spun the cotton into thread with remarkable efficiency, producing a flawless, even line. But as she watched the perfect thread form, a deep sigh escaped her lips. The external perfection of the thread, the undeniable strength of the cotton, did nothing to soothe the internal fragmentation she felt. The thread of her inner life remained tangled, discontinuous, a collection of moments that refused to weave into a meaningful whole. Kamini would sit for hours, the rhythmic whir of the wheel a constant companion, yet her mind would wander, adrift in a sea of disconnected thoughts. She would recall a face, perhaps a childhood friend, but then the name would slip away, like sand through her fingers. She would remember an event, a joyous celebration or a quiet sadness, but the context, the sequence, the why of it all would be lost, leaving only a shimmering, isolated fragment. "How can I be whole?" she would ask the quiet room. if my own story is coming undone? She longed for a steady, unbroken thread, a continuous narrative that would define her, that would anchor her in the stream of time. She yearned for the certainty of a self that remained constant, unchanging, an identity that could not be unraveled by the gentle, insistent tug of the passing years. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, after the last strand had been spun and the wheel stood silent, she would spread a length of her own hand-spun thread across her lap. It was beautiful, perfectly even, strong enough to hold many things together. She would run her fingers along its length, feeling its smooth texture, its tensile strength. If only her own life could be like this thread, she thought. If only her experiences, her joys, her sorrows, her very self, could be woven into such an unbreakable strand, a story that would not fray, a form that would not dissolve. But the thread in her lap was merely cotton. Her inner world felt far more delicate, far more susceptible to the subtle forces that seemed to pull her apart. She had built her life around the act of connection, of making disparate fibers into a unified whole. And yet, for herself, that unity felt increasingly out of reach. She knew the stories of the village, the histories of the families, the long-ago events that had shaped their collective memory. She could weave these narratives for others with effortless grace, providing a sense of continuity and shared identity. But her own personal tapestry seemed to be unraveling, thread by thread, leaving behind only loose ends and disjointed patches. The quiet despair grew, not loud or dramatic, but like a slow, steady tide rising within her. It was the despair of a craftsperson whose tools, so effective for their trade, seemed powerless to mend the deepest breakage within their own heart. She could spin the strongest thread in the land, but she could not spin a stronger self. She could create an unbroken line for others, but her own sense of continuity, her own narrative, felt irrevocably fragmented. Kamini continued to spin, her hands moving with the familiar, practiced rhythm, even as her mind wrestled with the elusive nature of her own identity. She sought the single, central strand, the core essence of Kamini, that would hold everything else together. She believed that if she could just find that one unbroken fiber, her story would stop unraveling, and she would finally feel whole again. But the more she searched, the more she tried to force this continuity, the more scattered and fragmented her inner world seemed to become. The quiet hum of the wheel, once a soothing sound, now felt like a gentle reminder of the unending, unyielding task of trying to hold together what seemed determined to fall apart. Her life, like a thread too finely drawn, felt on the verge of snapping, leaving behind only scattered, unconnected fibers, a story forever unfinished. The village, in its quiet rhythms, held many such lives, each woven with its own unique threads of understanding and confusion. From the spinner's careful hands, our journey now turns to another whose gaze was fixed upon patterns, but patterns far more ephemeral, far more elusive than those of cotton. We journey now to Tara, a woman known throughout the valleys for her rare and quiet gift. Tara was a smoke reader. In the hushed temple courtyards, or beside the flickering hearths of homes seeking guidance, she would perform her sacred duty. With a steady hand, she would place carefully selected woods upon a small, glowing ember. As the fragrant smoke began to rise, coiling and twisting into transient forms, Tara would watch. Her eyes, usually calm and observant, would deepen, tracing the shifting gray tendrils, discerning in their fleeting dance the whispers of the future, the hidden currents of fate, the gentle guidance that others sought. For the villagers, her readings were often uncanny in their accuracy. She could see the coming rains in a plume that swirled like a gathering cloud, or the blossoming of a new love in a pair of entwined wisps rising in perfect harmony. She might predict a bountiful harvest from a smoke column that stood tall and unwavering, or warn of a difficult journey from patterns that writhed and broke apart. Her interpretations were always delivered softly, with a sense of quiet reverence for the mysteries she perceived. The villagers trusted her insights, finding solace and direction in the brief, beautiful stories she unfolded from the smoke. They would leave her presence feeling a little more certain, a little more prepared for the paths that lay before them, their own futures for a moment, held in a clearer light. Yet, for all the clarity she brought to others, Tara's own future remained a profound mystery, shrouded in a fog denser than any smoke she had ever read. When it was her turn to seek answers, when it was her own path she yearned to illuminate, the smoke would become stubbornly silent. It would swirl into formless clouds, or dissipate too quickly, or simply offer up patterns so ambiguous, so utterly devoid of meaning, that Tara would feel a familiar, quiet ache of frustration settle in her heart. She would prepare the fire with even greater care, selecting the most sacred woods, those known for their clear, potent smoke. She would burn the fragrant sandalwood, whose plumes were said to carry prayers directly to the heavens. She would use the resinous cedar, known for its ability to reveal hidden truths. She would even try the simplest, most common kindling, hoping that perhaps in its plainness, a straightforward answer for herself might finally emerge. But whether it was the rich, sweet scent of temple wood, or the earthy aroma of dried branches from the forest floor, the smoke, when rising for Tara herself, offered only confusion. It would writhe and churn, refusing to coalesce into any decipherable form, leaving her gaze to wander across its shapeless expanse, finding no anchor, no sign, no whisper of her own fate. She tried changing her position. Perhaps the fault lay not in the smoke, but in her own perspective. She would sit closer to the fire, her face almost stung by the rising heat, hoping that proximity would grant her a deeper intimacy with the ephemeral patterns. But the smoke, seen too close, became a dizzying blur, its forms too rapid, too overwhelming to comprehend. The heat on her skin only served to intensify her inner agitation, making her feel less clear, not more. Then she would try sitting further back, allowing the smoke more space to unfold, to reveal its larger patterns. She would shift her seat, trying different angles, different distances from the rising plume, hoping to find that one perfect vantage point from which her own story would finally emerge. But from a distance, the smoke often became too diffuse, too faint, its subtle movements lost in the vastness of the air. It would drift apart before her eyes, like a dream fading upon waking, leaving her with only the faint scent of wood smoke and a lingering sense of unfulfilled longing. She fasted, believing that a purified body and a hunger-sharpened mind might bring the clarity she so desperately craved. For days, she would abstain from food and drink, sitting in quiet contemplation, her senses heightened, her spirit attuned to subtle energies. She hoped that by stripping away all distractions, by cleansing her internal landscape, she would finally be able to pierce through the veil of her own uncertainty. She would light the fire, her hands trembling slightly from the fast, her eyes fixed on the rising smoke with an intensity born of quiet desperation. But the fast, while clarifying her physical sensations, only seemed to intensify the internal fog. Her mind, perhaps too empty, too eager for a sign, would project meanings onto the shapeless smoke, only to have them dissolve moments later, leaving her even more confused, more disheartened than before. The visions she saw were fleeting, contradictory, like fragments of broken pottery that refused to fit into a hole. Tara felt a deep, quiet yearning for a clear path for herself. She longed for the certainty she offered to others, for a glimpse of the road ahead, for a sign that would tell her where she was going, what she was meant to do, who she was truly becoming. She was a guide for so many, a beacon in the uncertainty of life, yet her own lamp seemed to flicker and dim when turned inward. The paradox weighed heavily upon her. She spent her days interpreting the ephemeral, finding profound truth in the transient dance of smoke and air. Yet, when that same smoke rose for her own eyes, it became an impenetrable wall, a silent screen upon which no personal truth would be projected. The very medium she mastered for others became the source of her deepest confusion. She tried to force clarity, just as Parvati had once tried to force the wind, or Kamini had tried to force the threads of her life into an unbreakable strand. She would stare intently, her brow furrowed, willing the smoke to reveal its secrets to her. She would hold her breath, as if the stillness of her own body could compel the smoke into a coherent form. She would whisper questions, gentle queries directed at the rising plumes, pleading for a personal sign, a whisper of her own destiny. But the smoke remained indifferent, swirling and eddying with its own silent, unyielding rhythm, deaf to her pleas, blind to her yearning. Instead of clarity, her intense efforts only seemed to intensify her internal fog. The more she stared, the more her eyes watered from the smoke, the more her mind felt cluttered with desperate interpretations that quickly evaporated. The beautiful, delicate patterns she could so easily discern for others became, for herself, a chaotic, unreadable mess. Her own vision, usually so keen, felt clouded, obscured, as if she herself were standing in the midst of a thick, gray haze. The scent of wood smoke, once a comforting signal of insight, now filled her with a subtle, growing despair, a constant reminder of her own blindness. Tara felt trapped, caught between her undeniable gift for others and her profound inability to apply that gift to herself. She could see the threads of fate for a stranger, but her own thread felt severed, lost in the swirling patterns she herself created. The more she tried to look into the smoke for her answers, the more she felt enveloped by it. Her senses dulled, her perception blurred. Her desperate attempts to gain insight only seemed to deepen the very obscurity she longed to escape. One quiet afternoon, after a long morning of reading for a steady stream of anxious villagers, Tara found herself utterly exhausted. The air in the temple courtyard, heavy with the lingering scent of many fires, felt thick and cloying. Her eyes, strained from hours of intense focus, burned slightly. Her throat felt dry, a tickle building from the constant inhalation of smoke. The last villager had left, clutching a small amulet and a whispered hope for a new beginning, their face illuminated by the clear guidance Tara had offered. But for Tara herself, the clarity remained elusive. She had lit one last fire, a small, hopeful ember meant just for her, but the smoke had been particularly dense, particularly unyielding that day. It had coiled around her, clinging to her clothes, settling in her hair, filling her lungs with a quiet cough. She felt suffocated, not by the physical smoke alone, but by the weight of her own unanswered questions, the persistent shadow of her own uncertain future. The smoke, instead of revealing, was concealing, wrapping her in its gray embrace, making it impossible to see beyond the immediate, swirling present. She stood amidst the fading smoke, her hands hanging loosely by her sides, Her shoulders slumped with a weariness that went beyond the physical. The silence of the now empty courtyard felt vast, echoing her own inner emptiness. She had tried everything, every wood, every position, every fast, every prayer, and yet the smoke had remained an unyielding barrier, a silent testament to her own clouded vision. Her yearning for a clear path was as strong as ever, but her methods, it seemed, only intensified the very fog that obscured it. She felt truly lost, standing in the heart of the very thing she used to guide others, yet finding herself utterly, profoundly without direction. The quiet hum of the embers was the only sound, a gentle, rhythmic pulse in the deepening twilight, a reminder that even fire, in its purest form, could produce a cloud that blocked the view. Tara simply stood, breathing in the lingering scent, feeling the quiet, persistent ache of her own unread future. The quiet hum of the embers was the only sound, a gentle, rhythmic pulse in the deepening twilight, a reminder that even fire, in its purest form, could produce a cloud that blocked the view. Tara simply stood, breathing in the lingering scent, feeling the quiet, persistent ache of her own unread future. Then a cough escaped her, a deep, racking cough that shook her slender frame, pulling her sharply from her reverie of quiet despair. Her throat, already dry from hours of speaking, felt raw and irritated. Her lungs, accustomed as they were to the subtle infusion of wood smoke, now protested with a sharper, more insistent tickle. Her eyes, already strained from her intense focus on the swirling gray, stung with a newfound intensity, a burning sensation that brought tears to their corners. The air in the temple courtyard, once merely cloying with the memory of many fires, now felt genuinely suffocating, thick and heavy, pressing in on her from all sides. It was not a conscious decision, not a sudden flash of insight, but an instinctive, primal need for breath. She did not seek an answer. She sought only air, clean air, cool air, air that would soothe her burning throat and fill her protesting lungs. Without a thought, her feet began to move. One step, then another, slow and deliberate, towards the archway that marked the temple's entrance, the threshold between the enclosed space of her work and the open expanse of the world beyond. She moved like a sleepwalker, guided only by the body's simple, undeniable demand for release from the choking embrace of the smoke. She pushed aside the heavy, woven curtain that hung in the archway, a barrier against the evening chill, and stepped out. The last lingering warmth of the interior still clung to her clothes, a faint memory of the fires she had tended. But the first breath of the evening air that greeted her was a revelation. It was cool, crisp, clean, sweeping through her, carrying away the lingering scent of wood smoke from her nostrils, soothing the irritation in her throat, filling her lungs with a quiet, expansive sigh of relief. The vast open sky, a deep, velvety indigo, stretched above her, studded with the first, hesitant diamonds of emerging stars. She stood for a moment, simply breathing, her head tilted back, her eyes closed, letting the cool, clean air wash over her face, through her hair, into her very being. The tension that had held her shoulders slumped, that had furrowed her brow in quiet desperation, began to soften, to ease its grip. The stinging in her eyes subsided, the tickle in her throat quieted. She felt lighter, as if a great weight had been gently lifted from her chest. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes. She looked up, not at the horizon, not at the ground, not at the distant village lights, but straight up into the endless dark, clear expanse of the night sky. There it was, unobscured, vast, limitless, a canvas of profound, silent clarity. The stars, countless and brilliant, shone with an unwavering ancient light, each a tiny, perfect beacon in the immense darkness. The moon, a slender crescent, hung like a silver boat, radiating a soft, gentle glow that illuminated the edges of the distant mountains. The contrast with the smoke-filled courtyard she had just left was stark, breathtaking in its simplicity. Inside, she had been surrounded by swirling gray, by patterns that formed and dissolved, by an elusive, ephemeral medium that stubbornly refused to reveal her own truth. Her vision had been clouded, her perception blurred, her spirit burdened by the very smoke she sought to master. But here, outside, under the wide open sky, there was no smoke, no cloud, no obstruction. There was only the vast, clear expanse and the effortless, abundant light of the stars. A wave of quiet understanding washed over her, a gentle, profound insight that settled upon her like the evening dew. She had been so busy trying to read the smoke, so intently focused on deciphering its elusive patterns, that she had forgotten the simple, undeniable truth. Clear sight often comes from stepping away from what clouds it. The true answers, the profound insights, were not in the smoke, but beyond it. They were not to be found by staring harder, by forcing interpretation, by attempting to manipulate the ephemeral. They were to be found in the stillness, in the space created by stepping back, by simply allowing the clouds to dissipate, revealing the vast, unclouded sky that had always been there, waiting. Her previous attempts to force clarity in the smoke, she realized, had been like trying to see the stars through a heavy, constantly shifting curtain. She had believed the answers were hidden within the fabric of the curtain itself, that if she only stared long enough, hard enough, if she only knew the right technique, she could compel the curtain to reveal its secrets. But the stars were always there, luminous and steady, waiting to be seen when the curtain was simply drawn back, or in this case, when she had simply stepped out from beneath its shadow. The smoke was a tool, a symbol, a temporary cloud, a medium through which she had helped others glimpse their path. But the sky, the true, unending canvas of insight, of boundless possibility, was always present, always clear, always offering its gentle, unwavering light. She had been so preoccupied with the small, swirling patterns of the smoke that she had overlooked the immense, silent wisdom of the sky itself. She had been so focused on the making of a vision that she had forgotten the inherent vision that existed all around her, always. A soft, almost imperceptible smile touched Tara's lips. The burden of forcing, of trying to create what was already given, began to lift from her shoulders. The quiet ache in her heart, the persistent shadow of her own uncertain future, began to subside, replaced by a gentle, expansive peace. She understood then that her own future wasn't an elusive pattern written in fleeting smoke. It was the vast, open potential of the present moment, unfolding beneath the stars, waiting for her to step into it with clear, unclouded eyes. The wisdom she sought was not to be found by intensifying her efforts, but by softening them, not by looking deeper into the cloud, but by stepping out of it. The path she longed for was not written in the swirling gray, but was always there, beneath the open sky, waiting for her to walk upon it with simple, quiet presence. She did not need to predict. She needed only to see. She did not need to force. She needed only to allow. This was the truth that settled within her, a quiet, gentle recognition that resonated with the lessons learned by others. Just as Raju had learned to truly guide when his familiar guides were gone, and Parvati had learned the patience of ants, and Chandra had discovered the free gift of starlight, Tara now understood that true clarity was not something to be manufactured or bought or forced. It was always present, freely given, like the air she now breathed, like the stars that now shone, simply waiting for her to step away from the self-made clouds, to create the space in which it could effortlessly reveal itself. She stood there for a long time, under the vast, clear dome of the night sky, breathing in the cool, clean air. The world felt suddenly larger, more expansive, more filled with quiet possibility. Her own mind, no longer straining against the smoke, felt clear and still, like a placid pool reflecting the endless, star-strewn heavens. The answers she had so desperately sought, the clear path she had yearned for, were not secrets hidden in the ephemeral, but open truths revealed in the expansive stillness. She had only needed to step outside, to step back, to step away from the very thing she had believed held all the answers, to find the boundless clarity that had always been there. And in that moment, under the vast, clear, unyielding sky, Tara finally saw. Not a prediction, not a fortune, but the quiet, beautiful truth of simply seeing what is, without the need for smoke or signs, without the cloud of her own urgent seeking. The path, she realized, was always clear when one chose to step beyond the clouds. And so, as the vast, clear, unyielding sky revealed its gentle truth to Tara, the path continued its quiet unfolding, leading us now to another village, nestled among fields of ripening grain. Here, the air often carried the sweet, nutty scent of transformation, the subtle fragrance of kernels gently coaxed from their raw state into something new, something complete. This was the domain of Danu, the grain parcher. His hands were broad and strong, accustomed to the weight of metal pans and the steady stirring of countless kernels. His face was often flushed from the heat of the fire, and his eyes, though keen, held a perpetually questioning look, as if searching for something just beyond the veil of smoke and steam. Danu's days were a rhythm of fire and grain, of careful timing and precise heat. He knew, with an instinct honed over years, the exact moment each kernel reached its perfect roasting, a moment of profound, irreversible transformation. The raw, soft, pale kernel would become firm, golden, and fragrant, its purpose shifting from potential growth to nourishing sustenance. It was a complete change, a finality that spoke of readiness, of arrival. Yet, despite his mastery of this delicate art, Danu himself felt perpetually unfinished, perpetually in between. He felt, deep within his own being, a persistent, quiet sense of being half raw, neither one thing nor another. He was not fully formed, not entirely complete, not wholly transformed. He yearned for that same sense of finality, that perfect, golden readiness that he bestowed upon the grains. He watched the kernels crackle and pop, their husks shedding, their inner essence revealed in a burst of aroma, and he wondered why his own inner world remained so stubbornly unroasted, so stubbornly soft and uncertain. This feeling was not a loud lament, but a quiet hum beneath his skin, a subtle ache in his heart. It manifested as a restless dissatisfaction, a sense that he was always on the verge of becoming, but never quite was. He would watch the young men of the village, newly married, setting off on journeys, building their homes, and they seemed so complete in their purpose, so utterly transformed into their new roles. He saw the elders, their wisdom settled, their lives lived, their stories fully told, and they too seemed to carry the quiet completeness of a perfectly parched grain. But Danu, in his mid-years, felt suspended, a kernel still waiting for the definitive heat, the final turning. So, he began to seek his own transformation. to apply the lessons of his craft to himself, albeit in quiet, gentle ways. He would sit for hours under the fierce midday sun, imagining its rays searing away his unformed edges, hardening his soft spots, hoping to achieve that inner golden hue. He would sit closer to the cooking fires in the evenings, feeling the heat radiate into his bones, willing it to penetrate his very core, to complete him, to finish the process he felt was so eternally stalled. He tried to force a sense of resolution, to hurry his own becoming, to push himself towards a definitive state. He sought completeness, a finality of self, a moment where he could say, "Now, I am done. Now, I am fully roasted. Now, I am truly myself." But the sun only warmed his skin, and the fire only brought a flush to his cheeks. The inner half-rawness remained, a persistent, quiet hum, a gentle question mark at the center of his being. One afternoon, the sky, which had been a brilliant, unblemished blue for weeks, began to darken. Heavy clouds rolled in, swift and silent, and soon the first drops of rain began to fall. It was a soft, insistent rain, the kind that soaks into the earth rather than runs off it, a gentle, nurturing rain that promised renewed life to the parched fields. Danu, caught by surprise, rushed to gather his freshly parched grain, which he had spread on large mats to cool. He managed to scoop most of it into storage bins, but a small pile, glistening and golden, remained exposed. The rain fell upon it, each drop a tiny, shimmering jewel on the perfectly roasted kernels. He watched, mesmerized, as the rain continued. He knew that raw grain given water would swell, would soften, would begin the miraculous process of sprouting, pushing forth a tiny green shoot, ready to embrace new life. But this grain was roasted. It was complete. It was transformed. And as he watched, for a long, quiet moment, he saw the kernels absorb the moisture, their surfaces becoming slick and dark. But there was no swelling. There was no softening that hinted at awakening. There were no tiny green shoots pushing through the surface. The perfectly roasted grain remained perfectly roasted. It could not sprout. It could not return to growth. Its transformation was absolute, beautiful in its finality, but a finality nonetheless. A wave of quiet understanding washed over Danu, a gentle, profound insight that settled upon him like the very rain on the grain. He understood then. Perfect roasting meant no return to growth. The very completeness he had so yearned for, the finality he had sought for himself, was also an end to possibility. It was a beautiful culmination, yes, but it closed the door to new beginnings, to unforeseen paths, to the boundless potential of becoming. His own feeling of being half raw, of being neither one thing nor another, was not a failing. It was not incompleteness. It was not a state to be rushed or forced into a definitive form. Instead, it was life itself, keeping options open. It was the vast, open potential of a seed that had not yet chosen its path, a kernel still capable of sprouting, of transforming into something entirely new, something unexpected, something that had not yet been fully imagined. His half-rawness was not a lack, it was a promise. It was the gentle, ongoing, fluid nature of self, a middle way between extreme states of being, a constant invitation to grow, to change, to evolve. The restlessness that had hummed beneath his skin began to quiet. The subtle ache in his heart began to ease. He realized that the very quality he had perceived as a burden, as a sign of his own unformed nature, was, in fact, his greatest freedom. It was the freedom to remain open, to remain adaptable, to remain a vessel for constant, gentle transformation. He did not need to be a finished product, a perfectly roasted kernel, to be valuable, to be whole. His worth was not in his finality, but in his ongoing journey, in the endless possibilities held within his unroasted core. He picked up a handful of the rain-kissed, parched grain, feeling its smooth, firm texture, admiring its golden hue. It was beautiful, complete in its own way, fulfilling its purpose. But then he looked at his own hands, at the lines etched by sun and fire, at the subtle tremor that came from years of stirring, and he felt the life coursing through them, the constant, gentle flow of blood and breath. His hands were not finished. They would continue to work, to change, to age, and so would he. His own life, he understood, was not meant to be a parched kernel, fixed and unchangeable. It was meant to be the living grain, perpetually poised between one state and the next, always holding the potential for new growth, new direction, new understanding. The gentle acceptance settled deep within him, a quiet recognition of the beauty in the unfinished, the wisdom in the ongoing. Just as Raju had found direction in truly guiding, and Parvati in patient observation, and Chandra in the free gift of starlight, and Vaimal in the renewal of letting go, and Jaya in the embrace of dissolution, and Kamini in the beauty of the tangle, and Tara in the clarity beyond the smoke. Danu now understood that his own half-rawness was not a state of lack, but a state of boundless potential. It was the silent, fertile ground from which all future growth could spring, the gentle, open space where life itself resided, always becoming, never truly finished, always holding the promise of what was yet to unfold. He stood there, the rain now easing to a soft drizzle, the air cool and fresh, the scent of damp earth mingled with the lingering aroma of roasted grain, a symphony of completion and renewal. And in that moment, Danu felt, not a finality, but a deep, quiet sense of wholeness, not despite his unfinished self, but precisely because of it. He was not a roasted kernel, but a field of living grain, forever in the process of becoming, forever holding the promise of the next gentle transformation. He was not complete, and that, he realized, was the most beautiful completeness of all. The rain had softened the earth, calming the dust, leaving behind a fresh, clean scent that promised new growth. And in this world, where every gentle shift in nature held a hidden lesson, lived young Pia, the crow chaser. Pia was swift and light-footed, her movements quick and purposeful as she moved through the golden fields, waving her arms, shouting softly, trying to scare away the flocks of crows that descended upon the ripening grain. Her days were a ceaseless dance, a constant effort to guard the harvest, to protect the precious kernels from the hungry birds. But Pia felt that her own mind was much like that field of grain, and her thoughts were like the crows. They would swoop in, uninvited, landing on her peace, pecking away at her quiet moments, stealing her serenity. She would try to chase them away, just as she chased the birds. She would wave her mental arms, shout silently at the worries and anxieties, the endless stream of reflections that seemed to steal her inner harvest. She tried every trick she knew, focusing intently on her work, singing songs to herself, even trying to outrun the thoughts, hoping to leave them behind in her wake. But no matter how fast she moved, no matter how loudly she sang, the crows of her mind always returned, settling back onto the fragile stalks of her peace, seemingly impossible to banish completely. She longed for a mind clear of these insistent visitors, a field untouched, pristine. She believed that peace lay in their absence, that true quietude was found only when the last crow had flown away, leaving her inner landscape utterly still. But the more she tried to chase, the more agitated she became, her heart aflutter, her brow furrowed. The very act of trying to banish them seemed to give them more power, to make their cawing louder, their presence more persistent. Her exhaustion was not just from the physical running through the fields, but from the relentless, internal battle against her own thoughts. One particularly warm afternoon, the sun beat down with a gentle, insistent heat. Pia had been chasing crows since dawn, her voice hoarse, her legs aching. A deep weariness settled upon her, heavier than any grain sack. She found a patch of soft, freshly turned earth at the edge of the field, shaded by a large, ancient banyan tree. Her body, accustomed to constant motion, suddenly refused to move another step. She sank to the ground, her back against the rough bark, and without meaning to, without even realizing she was letting go, she simply closed her eyes. The sounds of the field, the distant hum of insects, the rustle of leaves, and yes, even the caw of the crows, merged into a soft, murmuring lullaby. And for the first time in a long while, Pia, the crow chaser, fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she awoke, the sun had shifted, casting long, golden shadows across the field. The air was cooler, softer. For a moment she lay still, a profound sense of peace washing over her, a quiet emptiness in her mind. Then slowly, she opened her eyes, and what she saw filled her with a gentle wonder that stilled her very breath. The field was alive with crows, but they were not in a frenzy, not a chaotic mob. Some perched on the banyan tree above her, preening their dark feathers, their calls soft and conversational. Others were on the ground, pecking gently at fallen seeds, their movements deliberate and unhurried. And still others simply walked through the stalks, occasionally taking a kernel, but often just walking, observing, their presence a quiet, natural part of the field's rhythm. There was no urgency, no sense of theft, no battle. The grain was still there, abundant and golden. The crows were there too, beautiful in their dark, sleek forms. And they were somehow coexisting. A quiet understanding dawned upon Pia, soft as the evening light. She had spent so much energy trying to rid the field of crows, believing they were enemies, believing they were a threat to its very existence. But the crows were not enemies. They were part of the field's life, just as the sun and the rain and the earth itself were. They took some, yes, but they left much more. Their presence, in its own way, contributed to the balance, to the natural flow. And so it was with her thoughts. Her thoughts, like the crows, were not inherently bad, not something to be constantly chased away. They were simply part of the mind's landscape, arising and passing, some pecking at her peace, others simply observing, others just being. True peace, she realized, was not found in the absence of thoughts, but in the acceptance of their presence, in understanding that they were a natural part of her mind's ecosystem. She did not need to chase them away. She simply needed to observe them, to let them be, to understand that her peace was not diminished by their occasional visit, but deepened by her quiet acceptance of their natural place. The field, with its grain and its crows, continued to flourish, and so too could her mind, with its thoughts and its quiet stillness, coexist in a gentle harmony. This understanding, a quiet recognition of coexistence, wove itself into the fabric of the village's wisdom, joining Raju's patient guidance, Parvati's deliberate sorting, Chandra's embracing of starlight, Vimal's acceptance of renewal, Jaya's surrender to dissolution, Kamini's appreciation of the tangle, Tara's clarity beyond the smoke, and Danu's gentle acceptance of being unfinished. Each thread, unique in its color and texture, now began to reveal a larger pattern, a single, flowing tapestry. And in this same village lived Soma, a man whose hands were strong, accustomed to the heavy weight of wood. Soma was the funeral wood gatherer. His days were spent in the quiet, shaded groves, selecting and cutting the branches, shaping the logs that would be used for the sacred cremation fires. His work was essential, a vital part of the village's customs, a final act of respect for those who had passed beyond this life. Yet Soma carried a quiet burden within him. He felt, deep down, that his work contaminated him. The constant presence of death, the somber purpose of the wood he handled, seemed to cling to him like wood smoke, a subtle, pervasive sadness. He kept to himself, his voice soft, his eyes often downcast. He believed that the wood he gathered was solely for ending, for release, for the final dissolution of form. And because of this, he felt that his own life, by association, was somehow shadowed, touched by an irreversible finality. He longed for connection, for the lightness that others seemed to carry, for a life that felt vibrant and full of new beginnings. He tried to wash away the feeling of contamination, scrubbing his hands raw, burning cleansing herbs, but the subtle weight on his spirit remained. He saw himself as separate, distinct from the joyous celebrations of birth and the bustling energy of daily life, forever linked to the quiet, solemn passing. One crisp morning, the air still cool with the promise of a new day, Soma received an urgent call. A new baby had arrived in the village, a healthy, strong boy, and the family wished to light a ceremonial fire of welcome, a fire to purify the air, to warm the birthing chamber, to celebrate this precious new life. In his haste, and perhaps in the soft, lingering haze of a recent cremation, Soma, by mistake, brought wood from his funeral pile. He laid the logs carefully, stacked them with his accustomed precision, and watched as the first sparks caught, the flames beginning to dance and grow. The fire grew, vibrant and strong, casting a warm, welcoming glow across the birthing chamber. The new mother smiled, her face radiant in the soft light. The baby, swaddled tightly, let out a tiny, contented sigh. Soma watched, his heart unexpectedly lightened by the pure joy in the room. He saw the fire for what it was, a source of warmth, of light, of transformation. It was the same fire that had released the dead, yes, but now, in this moment, it was welcoming the living. A profound understanding, clear and bright as the flame itself, filled Soma. He realized then that fire, in its purest essence, was transformation. It did not judge its purpose. It simply transformed. It did not distinguish between an ending and a beginning. It simply moved from one state to another, burning, releasing, creating warmth, light, and change. The wood was not contaminated by death, nor purified by birth. It was simply wood, and the fire was simply fire, an agent of ceaseless, impartial change. His own sense of contamination, his feeling of being separated by his work, began to dissolve like smoke in the morning air. He understood that life and death were not opposing forces, but two sides of the same continuous flame, two movements in the endless dance of transformation. The very fire that consumed the old also made space for the new, warming the path for new life, new growth. He was not a gatherer of wood for endings, but a steward of the transformational flame itself, a participant in the profound, gentle cycle of all becoming. He was not separate from life, but deeply, intrinsically woven into its grandest, most sacred rhythm. And so, as the sun rose higher, painting the sky with the vibrant hues of dawn, Soma, the funeral wood gatherer, felt a lightness he had never known. He looked at the fire, now burning steadily, and saw not an ending, but an eternal, vibrant beginning. He saw not contamination, but purification. He saw not separation, but connection, a profound, gentle understanding that the same universal forces were at play in every breath, every heartbeat, every ending, and every new beginning. This quiet, profound insight, mirroring Pia's understanding of coexistence, brought all the threads of our journey together. From Raju, the ox driver, we learned that true guidance comes not from forcing a path, but from truly seeing where one is going, even when the familiar guides are gone. It is the wisdom of present awareness, of stepping into the role of the true navigator of our own lives. From Parvati, the winnowing woman, we understood that not all distinctions require force. Sometimes, the clearest results come from patience, stillness, and careful attention to the small, individual pieces, much like the ants sorting grain, teaching us the power of mindfulness in discerning what truly matters. Chandra, the oil seller, showed us that true light, like true wisdom, is always present, freely given, and often obscured by our frantic efforts to create it ourselves. We learned to let go of manufactured solutions and embrace the inherent light within and around us, like the unending brightness of the starlight. Vimal, the grass cutter, revealed that loss is not always an ending, but often a vital part of the cycle of renewal. His grass grew back thicker and stronger, teaching us that life flourishes through release, that growth often comes from letting go. Jaya, the mud brickmaker, embraced the river's lesson. Returning to formlessness wasn't a failure, but a preparation for new shapes, new life. Dissolution is not an end, but a transformation, where what seems to be lost is merely changing form, nurturing new beginnings. Kamini, the thread spinner, found beauty in the tangle. Not every thread needs to run straight. Some stories, some lives, are meant to be woven with knots and unexpected turns. True connection lies not in straight lines, but in the intricate, often messy web of existence, where every knot contributes to the whole. Tara, the smoke reader, discovered clear sight beyond the smoke. We learned the importance of stepping back, of creating space, and finding clarity in the stillness that lies beyond our preoccupations and the distractions we create, seeing what is, rather than trying to predict. Danu, the grain parcher, understood that his half-rawness was not a state of lack, but a state of boundless potential. His ongoing, fluid nature was his greatest freedom, an invitation to grow, to change, to evolve, forever poised between one state and the next. And now, Pia, the crow chaser, taught us the wisdom of acceptance, that our thoughts, like crows in a field, are not enemies, but part of the mind's landscape, coexisting with our peace. And Soma, the funeral wood gatherer, revealed that fire, in all its forms, is pure transformation, that endings and beginnings are but different aspects of the same continuous, sacred flow. Each of these quiet truths, gathered from the simple lives of humble villagers, whispers the same message. The path we seek has always been beneath our feet. Guidance isn't about control, separation isn't about force, light isn't bought, and growth often comes from letting go. Permanence is an illusion. Tangles are beautiful, clear sight is found in stillness, and incompleteness is the most beautiful completeness of all. Life is a field of coexistence, a dance of constant transformation. There is nothing you need to do, nothing to fix, no one you need to become. The quiet wisdom is already here, woven into the very fabric of existence, waiting for us to simply notice, Like the starlight that shines whether we light our lamps or not, peace, clarity, and purpose are not destinations to be reached, but inherent qualities to be uncovered, always present within the quiet landscape of our own minds. All we need to do is rest and let these gentle truths wash over us, like soft moonlight on a still pond, recognizing that the unfolding path is not a journey to a distant place, but a gentle awakening to the quiet, inherent wisdom that has always resided within and all around. Sleep now, dear traveler, with the soft assurance that your own path, in its own unfolding, holds all the beauty and wisdom you will ever need.